more reaction on these migration revelations from the former cabinet minister and MEP Anne Widdecombe now. Anne, just first of all, your reaction to this number, 25,000 new arrivals illegally during the premiership of the Prime Minister who said he'd stop the boats.
Yes, well, he claims regularly that he's going to stop the boats. He cannot tell us how. The Rwanda Plan is stuck in the courts. My view is the court should be obliged simply to speed it up because it is such an urgent national matter. But nevertheless, that's where it's stuck. He regularly pays large sums of money to France. And yet look at what happened with that tragedy in the last few days. The boat was hardly out of Sangatte. And the French, instead of taking it back to France, which is what they should have done in the interest of safety, if nothing else, was shepherding them towards our waters. So the French aren't taking this seriously, and it's a nonsense to suggest that they are. So bluntly, Rishi Sunak has not come up with anything in all the time he's been Prime Minister except rhetoric, except saying, stop the boats. Well, yes, Rishi, when, how?
Anne, you say Rishi Sunak has been all words and no action. Do you not support the Rwanda scheme as a deterrent?
I very much support the Rwanda scheme as a deterrent, as I have written and said many times, but it ain't happening. It's stuck in the courts. And the idea that this will be the last ever legal challenge, I think, is fanciful. So, as I said, I think the court should be obliged to hurry this up because it's a matter in the national interest. Not just an individual case being brought. But the fact is Rwanda hasn't happened. So no good ask me if I support it. Of course I support Rwanda. I'll support Ascension Island. I'll support any a reasonable offshore facility. But it isn't happening. It isn't happening.
It is fascinating listening to our new political editor, Chris Hope, just then saying that people within Downing Street, within government, have told him they don't expect the Rwanda ruling to come until December now, right until the end of the year. And if in the first 9 months, 25,000 have come across, I suppose it only leads us to think that perhaps in the autumn months, if the weather is potentially more quiet, more calm, if we get this sort of late summer perhaps, these numbers are going to go higher still.
Well, the numbers are going to go higher still, whatever. We're going to get many more coming because there is nothing at the moment to stop them. There is no effective deterrent, which is what we could do. We could automatically house all new arrivals in secure reception centres while their cases were considered, and we could deal with them quickly and send them back if they didn't actually have a valid claim for asylum. And I can't see that any of them do. They're in a safe country. They're in France. France is under the rule of law. It's a signatory to all the conventions we've signed. They're safe in France. Now, if you're a refugee and you're desperate for a place of safety, and you found a place of safety, why would you then hurl yourself onto the seas to risk going to another place of safety? It isn't about safety. It's about economic migration. That is what it is.
Anne, what do you say to those who would say that all our efforts are essentially futile because we live in a globalised world, people are more mobile than ever, and that this is a global problem and that other European countries, for example, are dealing with it on a far larger scale?
I would say it is inevitable that people are going to try economic migration in the sort of global situation that we're in. Yeah, that's inevitable. What is not inevitable is the success of that. It is perfectly possible to deter people from coming here. You've got to consider the message that we're sending out at the moment, which is if you actually manage to get into Britain, by whatever means, you're very unlikely to be removed because we don't practice detention. We don't have national identity cards. We do have a flourishing underground economy. And we are just about the easiest country in the West in which to disappear. No wonder they want to come here.
Is that a call from you, Anne Widdecombe, to institute ID cards, to have similar policies to the French? That seems like a pretty top-down, illiberal approach to this issue.
Well, you call it an illiberal approach, but I think the interesting thing is that most Home Secretaries who have entered the Home Office opposed to national identity cards have actually left the Home Office believing that, yes, they have a role to play. They would have a role to play in controlling migration. They'd have a role to play in identifying bodies. They have a role to play in crime in general. And they could help. I am not saying do that tomorrow morning and we will solve the immigration problem. I'm saying that is a part of the attraction to coming here, is the ease with which people can disappear. Now, if you house them all in secure reception centres, they couldn't disappear. So you wouldn't then need the national identity card. So I'm not holding that up as the only option. I'm saying it's a contributory factor to why people come here.
And just very lastly, before we let you go, what is your view of the situation with accommodation? Because we've seen the barge, a few migrants went on it, then they were evacuated immediately. We're having problems now with RAF bases, essentially people refusing to live in the accommodation that has been provided. It seems it's farcical at this point, isn't it, really?
Yeah, that's why they shouldn't be allowed to refuse. They should be in secure reception centres. I'm tired of saying this. I've been saying it for more than 20 years, quite literally more than 20 years. It was a policy that I devised when I was Shadow Home Secretary, based upon what I'd actually seen when I was handling immigration in the Home Office. And that is what we need. And then there wouldn't be any issue about, where they can refuse accommodation. Their accommodation would be the secure reception centre. The only people who would come out of that into normal accommodation would be the genuine asylum seekers. And as I say, if you're in France, genuine asylum seeker would seek refuge there.
Well, Anne Widdecombe, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you so much for your views this morning on that news. Of course, 25,000 new migrants crossing the Channel illegally since Rishi Sunak took office.